Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Chris Paris from the Department of Veterans Affairs. We're going to give folks maybe a minute or two to join, and then we'll get started. Hey, Megan, I see that it's 3:02. Do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yes, I will get started. I was actually just going to write in the chat. I see several familiar names, but I see some new names, and we'd love to hear if you want to put in the chat maybe who is joining us today from which organization you're representing here today. My name is Megan Caposell. I'm with the Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity, and Infrastructure Security Agency. And I'm joined here today with Chris. And Matt regrets he can't make it here today, but Chris, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon. Chris Paris, Department of Veterans Affairs. I'm a senior advisor for their Cyber Workforce Management Office. Excited to be here.
And I'm with the CISA Office of the Chief Human Capital Officer, and I oversee our cyber workforce programs. Next slide, please. And so we presented actually at the last NIST-NICE conference in Scottsdale. So we're happy to be back here with NIST-NICE today, and appreciate them having us back, as well as the work working with FIU. So just to give you a general background before we get started, but we're very excited to share with you today the demo of the tool and more about the work that we've accomplished over this past year. So I don't want to spend too much time on these next few slides, but just to, for those, if you weren't able to join us last year, we had endeavored on this project starting in about October of 2018, and myself and some of my counterparts in the Federal Interagency got together because the Federal Cybersecurity Workforce Assessment Act requires us to use the NIST-NICE framework and to code our entire organization. And OPM has put out some memos and information, but we realized that as we were going down this, we needed to have some more clarity with this. And then it started into career path planning. And then we realized that all of us were sort of doing things, but using disparate approaches, and they were just disparate efforts. So we came together to start to talk about how we could come together, uniform approach and a methodology, standardize the implementation and our understanding of everything, with the intent to better code, recruit, and retain and develop our workforce, and really establish the federal government as an employer of choice. So we started on that project in October of 2018, and I think our first working group meeting was in May of 2019. Next slide, please. And as part of what we did, we were able to meet with the Federal CIO Council and their Workforce Subcouncil, the Chief Human Capital Officer Council, and the Chief Learning Officer Council in the federal government. And through their support, we have their seals on all of our products. And the federal CIO was able to help us by sending out a request for participation. So the work that we're going to talk to you about today is the culmination of working together in partnership with 21, or actually I think it's 22 maybe of the 24 CFO Act agencies. And to try to make sure I don't talk past anyone, it's the Chief Financial Officer Act agency. So it's the larger agencies in the federal government. And you know, the benefit of doing this and part of what we were selling is just that one, yes, the uniform approach and the standardization of our understanding, but also there was a financial cost avoidance and cost savings opportunity tied to that. So we can estimate, I mean, conservatively, assuming that we had GS-14s participating as our subject matter experts and our uniform approach with the focus groups, that we conservatively saved around 15.5 million and 278,000 hours. So, you know, wearing my taxpayer hat, I think we can all appreciate that. And so those are some of the benefits that we think we garnered. And then the next slide, please. And so what this slide is to illustrate our approach here was at the basis of every federal government job is always going to be the classification using the occupation series. So it's the OPM occupational series handbook that guides, and that's always going to remain the base. But on top of that is where we saw the career pathways in our career pathing effort. And so through our effort, we were standardizing. There is a list of tasks and a list of KSAs associated with each of the work roles. And so what we were endeavoring to do was to come up with what those core tasks, core competencies, and core knowledge, skills, and abilities were specific to each work role. So on top of the occupational series requirements, we can overlay those federal-wide understandings of what are going to be considered those core task competencies and KSAs. And then each department and agency, in addition to that, maybe would have some more that they wanted to lay on top of that are more mission specific for their department or their specific work unit. So the work we were doing, well, it's not at the absolute base, it's that next layer up. And then you can add on top of that. Did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I do, thanks. So one of the great things about the working group effort that we led is because the federal government was required by law to align its organization to the work roles in the framework, we realized that we were, as a federal government, really uniquely positioned to identify these work role specific requirements over and above what we already had for the OPM OCC series. And so that's what we, as a working group and through the focus groups with our cyber practitioners, really set out to do. Megan mentioned, the core content. So looking with a magnifying glass at each one of these work roles and saying, what are the core tasks? What are the core knowledge, skills, abilities that we should expect at a minimum for these work roles that we can, levy upon somebody or use to qualify somebody into a cyber-specific position over and above what we already use for the OCC series, which are very broad in nature. So it really allowed us to take a hard look at the ways that we can develop targeted strategies to recruit and develop and retain our cyber workforce using the work roles and this pyramid that you see here. Next slide. So this is one of my favorite slides because it really captures an actual barrier that we observed when we worked with our practitioners in these focus groups. We had folks who were coming to us and they were very adamant that they were not part of the cybersecurity workforce and that they had been selected to attend the focus group in error by their supervisor. And it was kind of perplexing to us because as a government, we've done this alignment. We've taken a hard look at our position descriptions and aligned them to the work roles. And so we were, scratching our heads, how can we have so many people say that they're not part of this workforce? And it wasn't until we actually sat down with the practitioners and looked at the tasks of these work roles and ran through each one of them with the individual for them to actually realize, hey, I do perform these tasks. That is representative of the work that I do. I guess I am in this framework. I'm represented by this framework and I am a part of this workforce. What it meant for us is that we needed to go back to the drawing board with how we depicted and how we visualized to this community what it means to be a part of the cybersecurity workforce. And so for us, the easiest way to do that was to actually use the word cyber and present it as an umbrella term. And under that umbrella, there are different communities of like skills. And so as you can see here, there's 5 specific communities, skill communities. There's information technology. So those are your traditional work roles. And the next slide will show you an alignment of work roles to these communities. But you have IT, you have cybersecurity. So these roles that have an inherent protect and defend component to them, these are the ones that you typically think of when you hear cybersecurity. So those who are in a security operations center or an office of information security, their inherent job is protecting and defending. And then you have 2 other communities that are largely made up of work roles that are employed by DoD and the Intel communities. And then we really wanted to try to depict the fact that work in the cyber workforce can be incredibly diverse. And so we felt that that was best done by showing a cross-functional community built up of lifecycle and talent and strategic management work roles, as well as legal and law enforcement. And so that's why you see a cross-functional community at the bottom that spans across the other 4 communities, because those who perform those work roles can operate in and amongst the other different communities that sit above it. Next slide. And so in addition to presenting the Venn diagram, we also had to do this rough alignment of existing work roles in the framework to their respective communities. And it allowed us to not only make sense of the work roles and how they group together and how we can better describe this very diverse workforce, but it also allowed our partners in the working group to take this back to their leadership and to show them and to help explain that those who are represented by the NICE framework, and oftentimes it was a much larger population than they originally thought. And so this guidance helped our partners to do more accurate coding, to better identify the true cyber workforce within their respective organization. And it also helped our practitioners to understand where they may fall and what other work roles may relate to the one that they're currently performing. Next slide. And so in the last year, Megan mentioned, we really kicked things off in July of 2019. Over the span of the last year, we conducted 39 separate focus groups. And what that means pre-COVID was a 2-day in-person focus group with practitioners throughout the interagency. So we would put out calls to our partners saying, hey, you have the alignment of your workforce to these work roles. Give us somebody who performs the 612 security control assessor for 2 days to help us identify, the attributes, the core attributes and the core content of these work roles. And we would lead a very collaborative and interactive focus group with them for 2 full days. After COVID, it turned into a 1-day virtual session, but we still were able to meet with practitioners across the interagency. So that meant that we could really build that federal government-wide consensus of government-specific requirements and perspectives. But it allowed us to do that really speaking in one voice and making sure that everyone was represented. But it truly fostered a better understanding of these work roles and what the requirements of each one are. And so this is just a snapshot of what we were able to accomplish working collaboratively with the working group and the federal practitioners that they sent us. Next slide. And so we have a number of speaking engagements and opportunities to explain the working group and explain this really cool tool that we worked on in partnership with CISA and the Cybersecurity Defense and Education and Training team. But I also want to highlight that in the coming days, there's going to be a Cyber Career Pathways site on DoD's Cyber Exchange. There's going to be a report released on November 23rd, so next Tuesday, by the CIO Council that will explain what we've done in the last year. It'll explain the methodology, it'll explain the intended impact and audiences and have some suggested applications. And then at the end of this year, we're looking to release playbooks. So guides for how our intended audiences can apply the pathways to their specific and respective needs. And then in working in strategic partnership with CISA, we're going to iterate upon this tool that we're about to show you and ideally release a even more fully functional tool in early to mid-February. So this is just to show that even though our original intent was to create career pathways for the work roles, there's so much momentum that was gained in the working group that we feel that we have to continue on because there's so much awesome work that's left to do. Next slide.
And so when we met with, we showed you the program of everybody that we met with over the span of a year. And when we would get them together, we did a series of, sorry, a little prompt came up on my computer. We held originally a 2-day focus group and then a 1-day focus group, and to arrive at what were the core competencies, tasks, and KSAs and the behavioral indicators, we led a series of exercises, as well as partnered with our friends over at OPM. And because the Federal Cybersecurity Workforce Assessment Act requires us to code our workforce, we were able to pull that data from across the interagency and see how people were mapped. And so in the role overview area, we were able to be informed about the types of occupational series that were aligned to each of the work roles. We used the descriptions from the NIST-NICE framework, as well as elaboration on that for more of like a elevator speech type thing. We looked at the pairings with OPM data to see how people were coded, and then other secondary or tertiary codes that were also aligned. We talked with the SMEs about the related titles. So this is helpful if you're running a recruitment program, and so everything's not exactly labeled the same, and so we look for those synonyms when going to look for talent or when reading resumes. And we had conversations with them about the we looked at the grades that they were most commonly associated with, in addition to the occupational series. And we talked a lot about the on-ramps and off-ramps, and we could talk to you a little bit about a tool we're creating at the end of this. But, you know, what were those natural segue points? So while we were looking at this as the ladder, so we were talking about the career pathway specific to, in this instance, looking at the cyber defense analyst role, the 511 work role. So we were talking to these SMEs who were in the CDA work role and talking to them about the ladder progression for this work role. But we were also talking to them about those natural on-ramps and off-ramps where they would see people coming from prior to this, as well as those off-ramps where they see people going to next, and those natural segues. We did talk to them about the education and certifications as they aligned at the different career points, but we also have been working hand in hand in partnership with Matt and his team over there in the DoD, talking about to 8140. And so we can get into, I think we'll get into that in a little bit as part of the tool demo. And talking about the certifications and the work that we're going to recognize there. And then we started in a series of exercises. And so while they helped us arrive at the core tasks, then we took those tasks specific to each of these work roles and discussed those behavioral indicators about the permutations of that task at the entry or early career level, that intermediate level, and that advanced or expert level. And we aligned KSAs to each of those tasks and then the related competencies. And so while it doesn't recognize necessarily the competency holistically, because we know they're a combination of the KSAs, it recognizes the aspects of them. The task permutations, which is the behavioral indicators, and I just talked about the task to KSA mapping we did specific to each. So in addition to the tool that we're going to be sharing with you here momentarily, we do have the actual career pathways that we're going to be publishing. And I think we'll share with you at the end of this the link where you can find those.
Yep. And so I mentioned before that because the workforce was required to align, to these work roles, the government, the NICE framework answered a lot of questions that we had. How do we talk about cyber in the same way? How do we describe the work that needs to be done, the expectations that we need to set? So the framework answered a lot of questions, but it also opened the door for a lot more to be asked. And so from a workforce planner perspective, from a practitioner perspective, from a graduate perspective, questions like, how do I use the framework to inform my educational pursuits? How do I use the framework to search for open positions? How do I, as a hiring manager, use the framework to attract the right talent? So many of these questions we sought to answer by learning more about the work role and providing this larger career pathway document to aid those multiple audiences. So we envision, and we'll talk to this more in a little bit, but we envision human capital specialists using the work role overview to better write position descriptions, or to work with their customers, the hiring managers, to write better PDs, to tailor job opportunity announcements to the right expectations of who they're looking for. And then, if you're trying to write a position for one work role, we wanted to show what the pairings were. What are the common pairings? Where should you direct your eye amongst the 52 work roles to see, if you're using this one, these few might also be related. So it's kind of like a quick help tool for those who are not as familiar with the framework as we might be, to use it to best meet their needs. So that's what you'll find in our larger career pathway documents that can range anywhere from 25 to 50 pages long, depending on the context of the work role and just the amount of tasks that may be embedded in each. And we'll give the link to that in a minute.
And the good news too is that, and I see Glenn is here from, I hope I don't mispronounce this, Estrella Mountain Community College. And so for those on the call who are in academia, you can help use this to also guide curriculum. And we're going to talk a little bit about the learning objectives that we're working on next, specific to this. But this is going to be helpful for you to identify, whether you're working with undergrads in those early career points, or graduate, maybe more at that intermediate and or advanced levels. It's going to help you with those behavior indicators.
Yep. Next slide. So from the outset, we knew that we were building, as I said, 30 to 50 page documents that we did not want to just sit on a shelf. We wanted this to be immediately applicable, immediately usable. And we wanted to have the documents available for those who need to go into the detail that's going to benefit their unique position or situation. But we wanted to also take all that content and over time make a very interactive and engaging tool set by which anyone can come and just use the tool for career discovery, for better understanding the framework, for informing their educational tracks. And so we, from the outset, formed a very strategic partnership with CISA's Cybersecurity Defense Education and Training team to develop such a tool. And that's really what we wanted to come back to you after having presented this concept to you last November at the NICE conference in Arizona. We wanted to come back 1 year later and show you what we've been able to do and what we have in the works for the next couple months. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. And if I can take control of the slideshow, awesome. I will go ahead and share my screen and we'll do just a quick demo of that tool. Megan, if you could let me know when you can see my screen.
I can.
Awesome. All right. So what you're seeing is the Cyber Career Pathways tool. It is currently available on the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Careers and Studies website. So it's a site that has amazing cyber content for those in the workforce, as well as those trying to get educated in cyber. I encourage you to check it out, especially check out this tool. It was released on August 5th, so it's still relatively new. But we're trying to get the word out there that it is there. And so when you come to the tool, you'll be presented with that Venn diagram that we showed you before. And so for us, this is really one of the biggest wins, because I hope it resonates with everyone on the call, but it truly resonates with me because it's a very easy and digestible way to understand how cyber is more inclusive than it is exclusive, and how there's a myriad of roles that I might be able to perform if I wanted to join that cyber workforce. Oftentimes when someone says cybersecurity, I at least when I talk to my family about it, they think I'm heads down, hands on the keyboard, eyes on a screen, looking at network, traffic alerts. And I have to explain to them, no, I'm a cyber workforce developer. And they're like, oh, well, what's that? So this is a fantastic tool to learn what that is, to explore the framework. Because before this, it was really, you could look at it at the NIST special publication, or you could look through the work roles of an Excel document, but you didn't have something that was immediately interactive and easily digestible, like I said. So you come to the tool, you come to that Venn diagram. Each of these skill communities are interactive. So as you click on a community, it'll populate these work roles down there in the form of nodes and connecting lines. We think of it as the cyber galaxy. So as I explore the cybersecurity skill community, I can hover over a work role and you'll see these connecting lines. And what that is depicting are other work roles that share high levels of overlapping knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so when I click on a work role to learn more, it's going to give me this little prompt saying, hey, did you want to compare multiple work roles? And we'll get to that in a moment. But you'll be able to learn more about what it means to perform cyber defense analysis. So you'll get the description of the work role that's in the framework. You'll see what community it belongs to, the category and specialty area, as well as the OPM cyber code. So this kind of gives a nod to the fact that we intend for multiple audiences to use the content that's here, not just those who are looking to have a career in cyber or transition into cyber, but it's going to ideally be for our human capital specialists and hiring managers as well. And then you'll notice, like I said, those top 5 roles that share overlapping knowledge, skills, and abilities.
Chris,
and,
are you showing, I'm still seeing the Venn diagram.
Oh yeah, I'm not sharing that anymore. Can you see it now?
Yes.
I
Yes.
apologize.
You might want to repeat what you just did.
I will.
And then if you want to toggle on federal as well.
Yes, I will. Apologies, everybody. So these are the Venn diagram, and each of these skill communities are interactive. So if you look at cybersecurity, like I was trying to demo before, it will reorient the nodes that were below here, and you can hover over any one and you'll see these connecting lines. Those are the other work roles that you might want to look at, or other work roles that share overlapping knowledge, skills, and abilities. Then you can select on any one of them to learn more. You'll see the description, you'll see the community, the category, the specialty area, elements from the NICE framework, and then you'll see the OPM cyber code. So again, giving the nod to the fact that human capital specialists or supervisors and hiring managers may also use this. And then you'll see those top 5 related roles. Now, just looking at the description is not enough. Ideally, you're going to look at the tasks, and you're going to look at the knowledge, and you're going to look at the skills and the abilities. And what you're going to notice here, in addition to the elements that are existing in the framework, you're going to see this A or C. And what that means, what that's meant to denote, is whether the task is additional or core. So this is content that we obtained through our focus groups with the practitioners. And when we say core, what we mean is the task is foundational to the work role. If you're trying to qualify somebody as a cyber defense analyst, this is a task that anyone who performs cyber defense analysis should be able to perform. And you'll see the additional or core for the knowledge, skills, and abilities as well. And so what this helps do is it helps give a pared down subset, because some work roles have upwards of 30 to 40 tasks. And so you really, as we were going through and building these pathways, initially we had to ask ourselves, is it reasonable to expect someone to be able to perform 40 tasks right out of the gate? And the answer, more times than not, is no. There is a subset. There is a core list of tasks and KSAs that anybody should be expected to perform if they want to perform this role. And that's what we really aim to show here. And that forms, in that pyramid, the federal baseline requirements for the work role that sit on top of the occupational series. Now, over to the right, you'll also see capability indicators. So this gives a nod to the NISTer that was developed a couple years ago that developed capability indicators by work role, and it discusses the credentials, the types of credentials, continuous learning, education, experiential learning, and training opportunities that you might want to look at based on the content of each of the work roles. Now, you saw the prompt, or if you didn't, there is a prompt. Anytime you click on a work role, it tells you, hey, would you like to compare another work role? And so if you come over to this diagram, you'll see that the system security analyst is a lot larger than the others. And what that means is it shares more overlapping knowledge, skills, and abilities and tasks than the others with the work role that you selected. And so maybe I do want to hold up the system security analyst work role and compare the two. So it's a great feature by which you can quickly compare 2 work roles. You can see the descriptions, you can see where they fall in terms of the framework components, but most importantly, and most, or the feature that I think is most helpful, is seeing this overlap. So you can see the percentage of shared tasks and knowledge and skill and abilities between these two work roles. And what this really paves the way for is if I'm looking to prepare myself to transition into a new work role, or let's say I'm just tired of the work role that I'm in and I'm looking to make a transition to a work role in another community. I want to be able to hold up two work roles, see the difference, and then use that difference to inform how I prepare myself, whether that be professional development opportunities, a detail, additional certification or training. It's important because you need to have a starting place. You need to understand how one work role differs from the one that you're pursuing. And so as you see this, you're actually able to click on any one of those and start comparing. So you'll be able to see off to the left is cyber defense analyst, off to the right is system security. And you can see, these are additional tasks for the CDA, but they're core tasks for the system security analysts. And then you're also able to see, where the tasks differ, where that delta is. So if I'm a CDA, or let's say I'm a system security analyst, and I want to move to becoming a CDA, here are tasks that I should look at. And you can do this for the knowledge, skills, and abilities as well. And we'll talk in a moment how this tool that you're seeing here, while incredibly helpful, is just the tip of the iceberg. What we want to include in the future is not just being able to see the delta of where you may, what KSAs you may be deficient in, but also prescribe training that can address those KSAs or certifications that are mapped to the work role to get you shored up in the areas that you may be deficient in. And so the last thing I want to point out, you can clear this and you can go back to the homepage, is there's this little pill up here, and you can select all, which will show you all of the work roles, all of the tasks and KSAs, or you can select federal core. And so that will reorient these connecting lines to show you overlapping KSAs based on the core that were identified through these focus groups working with these federal cyber practitioners. And when you click on a work role, again, it will show you the core tasks and the core knowledge and the core skills and abilities right out of the gate. You don't need to do any additional filtering. Megan, anything else you want to mention before we jump back to the slide deck?
I did put the link in the chat so that you guys could quickly have access to that and maybe save it to your favorites. But we would appreciate any feedback that you have on this. And if you continue to come to this, we're going to talk about the evolution of where we're going with this. So we're excited that this was a starting point, and we continue to work with the CDET team at CISA for future iterations. Excellent.
Yep, if we can bring the slide deck back up. Thank you, Jocelyn. So I mentioned it's just scratching the surface of incorporating the content that we have in those 30 to 50 page career pathway documents and embedding it into this tool. So some of the future enhancements that we want to make is leveraging that material, that data that we've obtained through partnership with OPM, looking at how Fed-wide agencies and departments and agencies have coded their workforce, and seeing the alignment of the top 5 occupational series, seeing those related functional and position titles, and as Megan mentioned, showing the on-ramps and off-ramps. So what you see in the tool right now are relationships that are just built on the overlapping knowledge, skills, abilities, and tasks. What we don't show, and what we really want to show because it's incredibly valuable, is what's the natural progression? What are the stepping stones to a career in cyber that leverage these work roles? So if you want to perform the cyber defense analysis work role, what are the work roles that could come before? And if you're already performing CDA, where do you go from there? Which work roles should I direct my attention to that would require the least amount of training and upskilling for me to move into? And Megan mentioned that we've been working hand in glove with DoD from the start of this, and they're in the process of updating their 8140, which is their qualification requirements by cyber work roles. And in the next iteration, it's not just going to prescribe the types of certifications that someone can use to qualify for a cyber position, but it's also going to give a nod to the types of education and training that someone can also use to qualify. And so as that next iteration of 8140 is released, we're going to incorporate it into the pathways, and eventually the certifications will make their way into the tool. As I mentioned before, after you've identified where you may be deficient or which KSAs you need to pursue. It's not just going to tell you, which ones you're deficient in, but it could also offer the types of certifications that you could pursue to get yourself trained up and prepared to make that lateral or advancement in your cyber career. And lastly, Megan mentioned, we did a whole exercise with our practitioners to fill in some missing elements or elements that were missing from the framework. And so a very quick mention or something I want to mention is when you look at the framework and look at the tasks, they're written in a singular way. What we did with our SMEs was we held each task up and we asked them to, how could they slightly modify it to read at lower and higher skills proficiency levels. And so Megan mentioned before the words entry, intermediate, and advanced. And that really pertains to how can someone perform this task at a more entry, intermediate, or advanced skill proficiency level. So those are called behavioral indicators, and they're in each of our career pathway documents. And that's something that we want to add to the tool. Going along with those tasks at different proficiency levels, we also had our SMEs map the task to their individual knowledge, skills, and abilities that you would need in order to execute or perform those tasks. Something also that was previously missing from the framework. All we had was a full list of tasks and a full list of KSAs, but we didn't quite understand how individual KSAs could support their respective tasks. That linkage was built with our federal practitioners, and that's included in our pathways. And eventually we'd like to see it also included in the Cyber Career Pathways tool. And Megan, I think you could probably mention this in the next slide as well, but that'll really pave the way for building out learning objectives and curricula, and it could have, very much help our academic partners as well.
Mm-hmm. And before we go to the next slide too, I would be remiss if I didn't say, and I know Nancy Jane is on here from our CDET team, the NICS website also has a plethora of training opportunities. And one of the benefits and one of the reasons we sought out actually stewarding this through the NICS website is because we hope to evolve this and tie the work that we've done here. And so as Chris was showing with his example, the CDA role and this, I forget which one, the security architect.
System security analyst.
Yeah, system security analyst. And wherever that delta was, that you could be able to eventually click on that, and then it's going to bring you to actual training. So the vendors can write in right now, as it is with our training catalog, you can write in and showcase the trainings that you have all over the country. So if you're on, you can shepherd your students or your employees to that website right now to be more informed about the trainings that's out there specific to each work role. But linking those two together definitely is one of our goals. I don't have anything else. If you want to go to the next slide. And I think we've talked a little bit about this throughout this, but there's a lot of application for this and a lot of benefit. With the work that we've already done here, we're starting to work with Jody, who I think is on here today with us from OPM, and her PD working group. And so, building these into all of the PDs and helping to inform how we build PDs. So we're working hand in hand with OPM on that and making its way to the job analysis. We're working with OPM and USA Jobs to actually start coding the positions that we're advertising across the federal government using the NIST work roles. So, trying to make these more prevalent and dominant and using that consistent approach in all of this. And, through that, the job analysis, the candidate assessment, with the learning objectives, being able to inform curricula, training programs that for their IDPs and professional development plans, looking at this and being able to do skills assessments eventually with people based on these behavioral indicators. Where do people fall? Where are they supposed to be based on their career point and what, this federal wide understanding that we've come to has things at. So where are they falling? And near and dear to me, doing workforce planning and analytics. So we use an OCHICO, we definitely use this to inform how we're structuring our workforce and the grade requirements in setting up, what current state is and what desired future state is based on new capabilities and service offerings that we have or would like to have in the future. That's very specific to federal government, but it can be applied to also the private sector as well. I think online here today, we have a lot of people from academia joining us. And so, once we evolve this with the learning objectives and developing curriculum, so that we can produce the talent at the right level so that they can be better informed of what are the criteria they need to be able to get those early career or whatever jobs that they're ready for. And so,
and
go ahead.
Megan, the only thing I want to mention, because I know we have to move on, but I think the real intent or what the takeaway from this is the framework was released with the work roles a couple of years ago, and many saw alignment to it as just a compliance activity. What we've been trying to show in the last year, and especially through the career pathways, is we now have 52 different mechanisms to recruit, train, develop, retain our cyber practitioners. It's no longer just this large bucket of 2210 IT specialists. And maybe if you use the 11 parentheticals that are out there, it's now we have these 52 different lenses that we can run analytics against, we can understand our workforce against. But what we're trying to show through the applicability of the pathways is having these guides for our audiences to use to develop those targeted strategies around recruitment and hiring and development, but also allowing our students and recent grads to use the tool, to use the pathways to prepare themselves for federal positions that are already aligned to these work roles.
Mm-hmm. And understand how to better write their resumes for that too, to share their experience.
Right.
I think we only have a few minutes
Next
left.
slide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, as we're about to embark on evolving the working group from the career pathways to developing those learning objectives, also working to develop behavior-based interview questions, and then through all of this effort, the requirements for aptitude and skills-based assessment. So that is where we see ourselves going over this coming year, and what we hope to be sharing with you next November at the NIST-NICE conference.
Next slide. And lastly, I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of some upcoming announcements that I mentioned before. The CIO Council will be releasing a blog post next week. It'll have this report. The image, little screen grab is there on the right. It is a report that details everything that we've done in the last year, our understanding of cyber and how we've been kind of evangelizing that throughout the interagency, as well as with our academic and industry partners. And it's going to have links to the individual career pathways documents, which will also be hosted on a new DoD Cyber Exchange website that will go live in the coming days. On the next slide, you will see links to these resources. And so one of those links will be that DoD page with the URL. And if you click on the URL, you'll probably get a 404 error today. But I would encourage you to check it at the end of the week as we anticipate it being live then. And next slide. And that is it. So we really appreciate the opportunity to come back almost a full year later, show you what we've done in partnership with the interagency and the federal councils, and working very closely with NIST-NICE. And we encourage you to reach out. We encourage you to look at the tool, visit the report and the pathways, and give us feedback, because we're really trying to build this for you. So thank you. Megan, I don't know if you have anything else.
There was a question from Glenn in here. Is DoD still going to require certifications under 8140, or are they going to recognize experience and education as alternatives? I did respond that they are going to be recognizing certifications, experience, and education requirements.
Absolutely. Yep. They're going from a more certification-centric model to one that opens the aperture to additional ways that you can qualify into a cyber position.
If you have any more questions, we'd be happy to. I don't know if we can unmute or if we just put them all in the chat.
I know we're also at time, Megan. So
yeah, and if
if anyone has any questions, feel free to use those emails there and shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to discuss this more with you.
Yeah, we appreciate the opportunity to come back and share here today with you guys, and look forward to hopefully seeing everybody in person next year, maybe in Atlanta.